They all ate and were satisfied. The miracle of the multiplication of the loaves in today's gospel points to the abundance of God's love. And that is what we celebrate today in Corpus Christi, the abundance of God's love, who desires to satisfy us. That's why we're here. We worship God because God is the one who gives himself to us to satisfy us in the Eucharist. Some of you perhaps were at the we're in Lansing yesterday for the all-diocesan Mass at Lugnut Stadium and the procession from Lugnut Stadium to the Capitol steps. And you may see pictures coming out in the coming days from the diocese, but we had adoration on the state Capitol steps, adoring our Lord publicly, declaring that we believe that God is fully present in the Eucharist, that Jesus offers himself to us in the Holy Eucharist. They all ate and were satisfied. Imagine if the same thing can be said of us after attending Sunday Mass. Someone writing, they all ate and were satisfied. It is my hope and my vision as a pastor that as we come to Sunday Mass, we who are hungry for God may eat of his body and blood and be satisfied, so we can offer our praise to him, to love him, and to receive all that he has for us. Now we know that the Eucharist itself points beyond this world, that we're not ultimately going to be satisfied in this world, but it points to fulfillment in heaven where we will be deeply satisfied, where God will be the fulfillment of our deepest desires. And yet we know as Christians, as we come to be satisfied by Jesus, we come as a community of faith gathered around the Eucharist. And gathered around the Eucharist, I, as your spiritual father, have a responsibility of making sure that we do what we can to posture ourselves to receive all that God has for us. And so it's important for us to sometimes be reminded of how is it that we comport ourselves at Mass, to kind of give some housekeeping items, if you may, to make sure that we are protecting and guarding a culture and an atmosphere of prayer so that God can have his way in satisfying the deep hunger of our souls. And so this morning, I'm going to give some reminders about how is it that we gather as a people. Now, I'm not going to be speaking how is it that we receive Holy Communion, we receive worthily and reverently. I did that last year. But I just want to remind us of some of the kind of things that we can keep in mind so that we can maximize what we can receive from God at prayer. And before I get into these little housekeeping items, I just want to remind us that this particular building here is holy. This sanctuary, as you enter into these doors, is a holy place. It's a place of an encounter with God. And therefore, how we act in this place is different than how we act in a theater. It's different than how we act in perhaps a community center. This is a place that is holy. The second thing to remind before I get into these is that the purpose of these rules, these housekeeping items, is for the sake of maximizing our receptivity to God. They're not ends in and of themselves. And therefore, we need to be patient with each other when we think about these. The whole point of this is not perfection. No one's looking for or seeking perfection. What we are simply doing is that we are being called to something higher so that we as Christians can really give God everything and receive everything he has for us. So the vast majority of these housekeeping items or house rules are reminders, with one new one by popular demand. So here we go. Coming to Mass. A few years ago, Bishop Boyer encouraged every single one of us to come to Mass 15 minutes early. How's that working out for us? Why would he say that? It's because he wants us to prepare for Mass, to prepare our hearts to receive from him. And so one of the things that is also a benefit of coming to early is that we can get a parking spot. How many of you think our parking lot can be crazy at times? All right, only some of you, that's great. So we know parking is an issue here, which is why we're building a parking lot across the street. But to come early is to make sure that we get a spot so we're not feeling rushed as we enter into Mass. And as a reminder, when we come to Mass, if you want to drop someone off who has a hard time walking, we ask that you do it here in this carport in door A. That way we're not trying to do it over on the other side of the cones here, but drop people off over at door A. And then if you're entering these parking lots, to make sure you do it by means of Grand River Avenue and not trying to do it here because we have the cones kind of blocking it off so people can cross safely. But this is so that we can have some order in our parking lot. I know a lot of people are parking across the street now, which is also very helpful to kind of make sure that we are doing what we can to have order in our parking. And at the 9:30 and 11:30 Mass, these are our most full Masses generally. I just ask us to think about carpooling. And again, carpooling will help those who are coming to Mass for the first time, perhaps, to have a place to park. And so if we can do what we can to carpool, that would be great. A note on how we dress at Mass. I know this is a landmine. There are all sorts of landmines around this topic. So I'm just going to ask two questions. Number one, are we dressing appropriately for the dignity of what is happening at Mass? And number two, are we dressing modestly in a way that reflects our dignity and doesn't distract others from praying? I'm not going to get into very specifics here, but I want us to think about, are we dressing in a similar way that we would dress if we're going out to a nice restaurant or going out to do something very importantly? What we do here in worshiping God should be reflected in how is it that we dress. Now, of course, this is what we're aiming at. If you don't have time to change, of course you can come in what you're wearing within reasonable limits, right? And this is really important because one of the things that I'm most impressed by the most is when there are kids coming in their sports uniforms. They come to Mass. I celebrate that they're here because a lot of parents don't take their kids to Mass when they have sporting events. And so again, I'd rather have people inappropriately dressed and here at Mass than people not at Mass at all. But this is just, again, calling us to something higher, to rather recognize what is it that we're doing and how do we dress appropriately. When we enter into the church building, we do have a strong sense of family, so you'll see a lot of people greeting each other outside in the gathering space. You'll have ushers greeting people. We have a welcome desk. The priests and the deacons will typically greet people at these two entrances. We don't greet at this entrance because we don't care about these people. I'm just kidding. We just don't have the ability to greet everywhere, right? But and again, very clearly, the gathering space is the proper place to greet people. It's the proper place to have conversations with each other. Another good place is after this Mass, the 9:30 Mass. Every week, we have coffee and donuts downstairs. As you come in, you will notice that there are chairs in the gathering space. So the chairs along the back and in this little area back here. These chairs are primarily for parents with children and those who are elderly and those who are sick. There are various reasons why people may want to sit back there, but we want to try to reserve them for those people in the back. I understand that when our churches get full, and this parish is getting full often at Mass, that people want to sit back there. And again, that makes sense. But I want to just encourage all of you who sit in the back sometimes, and sometimes that's because we're late, we don't want to interrupt people. I want to give you permission to interrupt people. I'd rather have you in the church here and actually able to spend time being attentive to Mass than being out in the gathering space and maybe having a harder time actually paying attention. If I was a lay person and I sat in the back at Mass, I totally would zone out. So I don't want people to zone out. I want you to try to be as attentive as possible to what's happening at Mass. So as we enter into the church sanctuary, you'll run into often an usher. An usher is a man or a woman who assists the congregation in various ways to help people to become seated. They help take up the collection. They're aware of the needs of the congregation, sometimes even in an emergency. And you may see on the side of pews kind of a sign, like a blue medical sign. And when you see that on the end of the pew, it's because someone in the pew is a medical professional. And the ushers can address or get them when a medical emergency arises. And so as you enter into the pews, as you enter into the sanctuary, you will see holy water fonts at all the entrances. The tradition of the church here is that we dip our fingers into the holy water and we do the sign of the cross as a reminder of our own baptism. And as we remind ourselves of our own baptism, we are entering into God's presence as His beloved sons and daughters. And so I just encourage you to use the holy water as you enter. When you come in, right before you get into your pew, we genuflect as Christians. And we're genuflecting, which is our right knee hitting the floor. And if you can't do that because of your knee doesn't work very well, that's okay. But if you can try to have your right knee hit the floor, we're looking at the tabernacle when we do that. Our right knee hitting the floor is an act of worship. We're worshiping God who is present in the Blessed Sacrament, in the tabernacle. And what I teach the kids at the school is to maybe make an act of worship in your heart. So as you genuflect, Jesus, I love you. Jesus, thank you for dying for me. Jesus, I worship you. And we do that when we come into the church and as we leave the church. So this genuflection is our right knee hitting the floor in worship. I know a lot of people like to sit on the ends of pews, and people do that for various reasons. But when someone is wanting to get into the pew, politely move in or maybe get up and allow them to get in. Please do not glare at people. This is really important. If someone glares at you, glare at them back so as to win. It's really important. Now, to keep in mind that sometimes even just our bodily gestures can communicate love or can communicate annoyance and difficulty. Sometimes when people are glaring and they're having difficulty, it's because they're probably suffering something in their life. Maybe they just lost a loved one. Maybe they're struggling with some sort of impatience in one way or another. But please do not judge them. Just try to be as patient and loving with each other as possible. And again, try to give space for people as they enter into the pew. It just takes one bad experience for someone in our church for them not to ever want to come back. So be as loving as possible. And this is going to be hurtful for some people. Not hurtful, it's a little strong. Some people are going to take this maybe difficult. Please do not try to save seats when the church is full. When the church is really, really full, and sometimes at this Mass at 11:30, especially at Easter and Christmas, sometimes when you save seats, when there's like 100 people standing, people can get very, very upset. So again, it's not to say you can't save seats altogether. It's just that when the church is full, try to be as generous as possible. I think this last Christmas, a fight almost broke out. So I just want to prevent that from happening in our church. Sometimes when we come into Mass, we can be tempted to talk in the sanctuary. This is really a place of prayer, a place of preparation. When we get to our seat, what we're supposed to be doing is preparing our hearts for Mass. And that might mean thinking of what has happened in the last week, coming to understand the graces that God has given to us and maybe the ways in which we've fallen short in our sin, and then maybe reading the scriptures so that we can prepare for Mass. And so that means, generally speaking, what we don't want to have is a lot of conversation in this particular sanctuary about 15 minutes before Mass. So about 15 minutes before Mass, we should largely hear maybe the rosary or maybe some music happening. I don't want us to have a lot of conversations in here. Now, that doesn't mean that we should be cold to each other. It doesn't mean that we can't greet each other. It doesn't mean that we can't smile. It just means that we want to foster an atmosphere of prayer in this Mass. And certainly what I don't want is people shushing each other. We don't want to be the shush police, like shh, shh. Like that is completely unwelcoming. So that's not... I don't want anyone shushing anyone. That's the usher's job. The usher's job is to shush everybody. And it's just like, they're so good at it already. I'm kidding. So during Mass, we're going to experience distractions. And some people need to hear that. We're not going to be perfect at this. It's okay. It's okay if Mass can be distracting at times. It's okay that things happen that are outside of our controls. We're going to have that. But if we are distracted, especially with small children crying, remember that children crying at Mass is a sign of health. I want to be very emphatic here. We should be very, very patient with parents and children who are crying at Mass, because parents themselves know more than anyone how loud their kids are being. And they know, and it can be very difficult to bring children to Mass. I know from experience. I have to bring Father Joshua to Mass. It can be very difficult, It's like, oh, take it easy. It's hard. But the reality is that parents, this is difficult. So let's be as patient as possible. And I also think that parents know full well of how to bring their kids into the gathering space to really interrupt everyone who chose to sit out there when their kid is having a total meltdown. Parents know how to do that. And if it happens at one place that a kid is having a complete meltdown and is crying and screaming, and a parent is not taking them out, be of good cheer. The ushers are on their way to exit them from the church. I'm totally kidding. If kids distract you, I want to encourage you. As you hear them cry, this is what's helped me. Am I crying out to the Lord from the place of my need? Am I really giving to the Lord my heart? Am I asking Him to come to me and to give me all that I need from Him? So just allow that to be a reminder of prayer. And finally, after communion, I've had a couple people this week ask me, Father, what do we do? Like, when do we sit down? So, some people are sitting down when the tabernacle is closed. Some people are sitting down when the deacon is done purifying the vessels. When can we sit down? The answer is, I don't know. I actually looked into this, and my encouragement is that as a community here, when the tabernacle is closed, we may be seated if that helps us pray. You do not need to be seated. There's not a common posture here, but when the tabernacle is closed, you may be seated if that helps you pray. And remember, after communion is a time of thanksgiving, We're thanking Jesus for coming to be with us. We're communing with him. And as a community here, because communion takes longer, because we have kneelers here, we have a big congregation, our Thanksgiving after communion happens during Mass. Some parishes will have this kind of cultural kind of practice of after Mass, everyone kneels and everyone prays in silence. But at St. Pat's here, because communion takes so long and we have sometimes longer silence after Mass or after communion, our Thanksgiving is going to happen during communion, which means when Mass is ended, you may share and talk with each other on your way out, or you can stay in the church and visit. This is just very important to remember that. Finally, please do not leave Mass early. I know I often repeat this, but please do not leave early. Leaving early without a good reason, just as coming to Mass late without a good reason, can be offensive to God. Think about it. We get to come and hear God speak to us. We get to offer our lives to him and receive all that he has from us. We need to be very attentive to being here for him and to allowing him to love us. Sometimes when people leave Mass early, I often think that they're shooting themselves in the foot. All of us need peace. All of us need joy. All of us need his love. And when we leave Mass early, we're actually preventing him from giving us the very things that we want. So I encourage you to resist the temptation to leave Mass early. We should not be booking our Sundays so tight that we need to leave immediately after Mass. Immediately so tight that we have to leave Mass early. Now, of course, sometimes it happens where we have to leave Mass early for really good reasons. But I just really want to encourage us to be as attentive as we can to allow God to love us after communion. Over the years, you've heard me remind everyone to read the bulletin. Read the bulletin, especially my column. Why do I say this? It's not just because my column is great. Just kidding. But it's because I want us to not have so many announcements at Mass. Sometimes when people travel, they have there's 5 to 8 announcements at Mass. There's a lot going on at this parish, and we spend a lot of time and resources to make a beautiful bulletin that communicates things in a timely manner. That being said, sometimes we have announcements at the end of Mass. Usually it's because they're time sensitive or they're very important. We want to highlight something. But rarely we have someone come up and share a few words about a critical need or a critical part of our mission. When that happens, try to be as gracious as possible in giving your attention to the person speaking. Finally, my brothers and sisters, the scripture says, all ate and were satisfied. It is my vision that we who are hungry for God can come into this place of prayer and be satisfied by the love and the mercy and goodness of God at Sunday Mass. We're not going to be perfect at this, but if we sincerely try and we seek a higher vision of what Sunday Mass can be, I truly believe not only will God satisfy us, he will give us the strength and the joy and the goodness to share the gospel with all of our friends and family who do not yet know him, or perhaps who have stopped coming to Mass. If we can say yes to God and coming to him with great preparation, I truly believe God will not only satisfy us, but he will help us bring that gift of Jesus in the Eucharist to the world around us.